So this has been a lot of JavaScript this morning, and Elm. Didn't forget about Elm. Let's just take a deep breath. Doesn't that feel a little bit better? All right, now we can get started. So as he said, my name is Stephen Fluin. I lead developer relations for the Angular team at Google. So I have a really cool job. I love my job. I basically get to help developers and businesses be successful with Angular, and I get to understand and build apps with Angular so I know what it's like for the real world so that we can reflect those needs onto the Angular team to make sure we're making the right sort of product decisions as we continue to evolve things. So the story of how I got here today starts with a gentleman, Joe Eames. He's in the back there. You can wave and say hi. So he's one of the organizers for Framework Summit. And I was like, oh, we don't have slides? Well, you know what Joe looks like. He's right there. All right, well, I'll keep telling the story. So Joe was talking about, hey, do you want to come and talk about Angular a little bit? I was like, yeah, like I can do a 50-minute keynote. We can do some like live coding. We can talk about what's new in the upcoming version. This will be really fun. And he's like, at most 20 minutes? I was like, okay, 20 minutes. He's like, maybe try for about 15 minutes. I'm like, okay. Yes, 7 minutes would be really great if you could just get 7 minutes out. So I went from there. You okay? Do you want me to just turn the laptop around? It looks good on here. All right, see, Joe, I told you. All right, so 7 minutes. I'm not going to take 7 minutes. I'm going to take a little bit longer than that. Sorry. So I won't be going too deep into the technology, the functions, the templating. I'm going to let Tom handle templates and some of the reasons why we use them. But I want to just give you an understanding of kind of some of the things that Angular team values and how to think about Angular so that if you're interested, then you can go look it up and you can do the tutorial and all those sorts of fun things yourself. So Angular is a platform that makes it easy to build applications with the web. So we probably all know that. But we really always try and start a lot of our presentations with the things that Angular values. So first, we value apps that users love to use. Users are the reason we are all here today. Whether you are building for customers, whether you're building for employees, these are all users, and they're the only reason that software exists at all. Don't forget about them. But we also care about developer experience, and we want apps that developers love to build. And so we're really focused on things like developer experience and how can we make the developers that exist and the skills that you already have, how can we help you and take those even further? And lastly, we care about a community where everyone feels welcome. Community is critical to everything we do. Without the community building tools, libraries, components, extra analysis tools, runtime systems, all these things, Angular would not be successful, and we are successful because of our community. So thank you to events like this. If you haven't ever tried Angular before, one of the easiest ways to get started is to go to attend a meetup. So there's lots of meetups, a ton on angular.meetup.com. You can just search for Angular. There's meetups everywhere talking about Angular. You can go, you can learn, you can share your passion with others. This is one of my favorite things about being in on the Angular team is basically whenever I'm traveling, I can look up that city and type in like city name plus Angular, and there'll be somebody talking about Angular and sharing their love for it. There's also a lot of really cool groups in the Angular community. And so one I want to call out in particular is called NG Girls. And they're doing a lot of work to bring both new developers into the web ecosystem, but then also developers into Angular. So if you're interested in attending or supporting one of these events, definitely check out their website, nggirls.org. The final thing I want to touch on in terms of communities is the fact that in my job, I get to see really cool tools that I never could have imagined before just popping up on the internet. So this is one that's from a gentleman, Wasim Chegam, who he basically built a tool that will import a sketch file and then have this 3D blowout to help you visualize all of the pieces of a sketch file. And this is actually really useful for web developers who have to take a sketch file or some sort of illustration and then say, okay, well, how do I cut this up? What was the designer intending in terms of the structure of this app? How is this going to apply to other components and other pages in my application? And so the fact that these tools show up every day is so cool. There's also a lot of companies using Angular. If you flew here, you probably booked with an airline that uses Angular to do that. We're really popular in the financial space, airlines, companies. Anytime you have a team building Angular, this is a space where we're really popular. One of the data points we have is that about 90% of Angular apps are built behind the firewall. So not public-facing sites. These are productivity tools. These are efficiency things, but there's a lot of consumer-facing stuff as well, but it's much harder to measure. It's much harder to hear those stories because companies, they choose Angular all day, every day, and they never tell us. Another place that Angular is used is at Google. So we have over 900 projects at this point at Google that are using Angular. And this is really important, not just from a validation of kind of how it solves problems, but also from the perspective of validation of what we're doing. So Angular is an open source project. Every commit, whether you work at Google, whether you're on the Angular team, or whether you're a public contributor, you go to GitHub, you submit a PR, and it goes through the same process. And every PR, every commit, before it gets merged into our master branch, is actually validated against those 900 plus projects as a kind of comprehensive test suite, because we have a one version policy. So everyone at Google uses the latest commit to master of Angular. And this is a really amazing thing, because not only can we be confident that our releases are very good, we can be confident that every commit. So if you want to just check out from head, you want to just run on master, go for it. You will have a pretty good experience. So we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to leave you with 3 things to remember that we're going to go through. So if you walk away, remember these 3 things. We want to help you move faster, scale better, and reach further. So on the move faster side of things, Angular has an opinionated set of integrated tools that we worked really, really hard on. So whether you look at the CLI for automating workflow, so getting started, generating new modules, new components, adding new library code, generating new projects, all these things are automatic with CLI. You can enter a live serving environment. So every time you hit file save in your editor, you see that live load on the screen. And then also when you want to do builds. So we've done a bunch of work to optimize the build system, working with Uglify, working with Webpack, all these different tools to try and get the best results out for developers. And this is something we're continuing to think a lot about. We also try and solve a lot of very common developer problems. So routers, HTTP, forms. We try and have a solution to all these things that's going to work in a testable way, in a mockable way, that's going to scale across many, many different teams. One of my favorite capabilities that I love to show off is our capabilities around animations. A lot of people think that animations are all around this idea of design and delight and brand. But if you look deeper at animations, they can have a really important usability impact on your application. Animations can give your user subtle clues to where they are in the application, whether you're ascending or descending a hierarchy. And so adding animations to your application can give your users better usability across your app. We also have internationalization. So at Google, we build software for a lot of different countries and a lot of different languages. And we have that built into the platform. So in our templates, any tag you want, you can throw IE10N on that tag. And any attribute that you want, you can throw IE10N in that attribute. And then what we'll do is we'll be able to pull all of those strings out, generate an industry standard format like XLIF that you can pass off to a translation house, do the translation, and then do a build of an Angular application so there's no runtime performance hit to do internationalization. We also have the Angular Material project, which tries to take Google's material design philosophy and manifest it as a set of components. But as we were building out all of the material design components, we saw that we were writing a lot of code that had nothing to do with material. Right? We were building code that added capabilities to applications, like overlays or bidirectional input support. And so what we did is we started pulling out all of those pieces from Angular Material into something we call the CDK, or the Component Dev Kit. So if you want to use our kind of smarts, our intelligence, the problems we've solved around overlays, you can do that without having to opt into material design. The second point was about scaling better. And that we scale better by focusing on scalability and collaboration. Right? We want your apps to scale as they grow. So one of the ways we do this is with TypeScript. So virtually every Angular application out there is written in TypeScript. And even if you don't opt into the type system, because types are optional in most cases, you're still going to have that implicit typing that gives us more ability to scan and semantically understand what's going on in your app, which gives us the ability to update, keep it up to date, to modify it, to do refactorings better. All of these things get better because you're using TypeScript. We've also baked testing in from the ground up. So if you're using our CLI and you generate a new project, we're going to give you unit tests and end-to-end tests out of the box. We have a tool called Schematics, which is relatively recent release. And this is a really big deal for us because we think that the way that application developers using Node and NPM manage their dependencies is a big pain, and there's a lot of things wrong with it right now. So typically when you have an NPM dependency, and it has an update, what do? You install the update, and then you see if your app broke. And if it broke, you try and fix it. And if you still can't fix it, then you go to a migration guide and you pull up the website. And we feel like this model is a little bit wrong. And so one of the things you can do with Schematics is, as a dependency author, you could actually write code mods that will change a developer's code. You can change someone's Angular code to automatically adapt for breaking changes. And so this is something we take advantage of in Angular. We work with a bunch of different companies that are taking advantage of this as part of the ecosystem. And we found that this opinionated approach really helps developers in terms of their mobility across teams, across organizations. Because if you have 100 developers working on several different projects, it's really nice to be able to slot a new developer in and they automatically know what's going to work, what's not going to work, what the practices are, and they're going to have the same knowledge as the existing teams. We also care about kind of internal team collaboration and across multiple roles. So one of the things, we've got a module system that you can think of maybe being at the more architecture level. So you're trying to decide, what do I lazy load? What are the major chunks? What are the features of my application? Maybe you have a developer more focused on the component level. What is this experience? What does this page look like? And then because we use templates and CSS, you can just plug designers directly in and they're able to make modifications if they have that skill set. Third, reach further. We want your code, your skills as web developers, HTML, JavaScript, CSS, to reach further. We want your code to run in more places. So there's things like progressive web applications, where if you add a service worker to your app's going to work offline. It's going to be able to send push notifications. It's going to be more engaging. We've also worked a lot with teams like NativeScript, so that you can do things like ship to installed app stores so that you can take advantage of the Angular logic, but then use NativeScript templating. We also care about things like desktop support, using things like Electron. So an open source group called Narwhal, they actually just released something called the Angular Console, which is a GUI that lets you get started with Angular apps and build them and serve them all without ever having to dump into the terminal. And they're doing this with Electron and Angular. The last piece I'll call out here is about elements. So we have a project called Angular Elements, which allows you to take Angular components and ship them as custom elements for interoperability, or whenever you want to let the browser handle the bootstrapping instead of letting the orchestration layer handle that. So I've got a bunch of kind of funny photos here. So this is a photo of a couple of folks from the NativeScript team. So this is Sebastian and Alex. So we worked really closely with them because previously, if you wanted to use NativeScript in an Angular app, you had to have an Angular app or a NativeScript Angular app. And that was kind of a pain. And so we worked a whole bunch with them to add the schematics, to add all of the architecture into the CLI. And so now, recently, we just released the ability to actually have a single app where you can share components and render to an HTML template or to a NativeScript template. So share components, share business logic, and then have two different renderings, which is really cool. This is Eric and Albert from the StackBlitz team. So we've worked a lot with them because we want developers to have a really great experience. So for example, all of our documentation sites now use StackBlitz, so you can just jump in directly and start live editing code on StackBlitz. I have to say StackBlitz is the best. Here's a quote for them. I think they owe me a bug or a feature or something now. And then the last group that I'll talk about is Tracy and Ben from the RxJS core team. So RxJS really tries to take the idea of reactive programming or functional programming and bring some of those primitives to the web with things like observables. And so we've baked a lot of what they've done into Angular. So if you're using our HTTP library, if you're using our forms, if you're using our router, you've got more functional ways of writing these things that developers really like and give you an application, again, that scales very well. So people ask us a lot about kind of what is in the store for the future of Angular, because they picture us kind of scheming as a team in our office. But as I said before, we are open source, right? Every PR lives on GitHub, starts its life on GitHub, and we review it in the same place that everybody else does. And so a lot of times we'll actually see commits from our team end up on like Reddit. And that's a little bit embarrassing because maybe it doesn't have the right messaging at first glance, but we really do try and be open source first. And so some of our big plans for the future here are, one of them is focused around speed. So we look at speed in a couple different ways. So one is startup time. So the highest order of magnitude in startup time is actually bundle size and the way that you serve your bundles. So we're spending a lot of time on that. We've got a new renderer coming that basically inverts the relationship between your code and Angular. So historically, Angular would pull in your code, but with the Ivy renderer that's coming in the future, your code pulls in Angular. And so we just leave out the parts of Angular that you never use. We also care about build and test performance. So if you have a team of 100 or 1,000 people, we want your incremental rebuilds times to be very, very fast. And so we're working on bringing some of the best of what Google has out to the world to do that. We also have an initiative, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, about focusing on designers, both in terms of bringing designers into the web ecosystem, making them feel more empowered to build things like prototypes and design for the real web, but also improving the collaboration between developers and designers. We also want to help developers serve JavaScript better. So this is actually my goal for 2019. So historically, there was JavaScript developers that would serve on static sites like Apache or Nginx, and that was okay. And then we moved to CDNs and edge layers and edge caching. That was better. But there's something even more that we need to do. We need to start thinking at things like differential rendering. And if you have a set of tools that understand your application and how it's built, you can take advantage of those things in a much better way. By taking advantage of the knowledge of the browser and the knowledge of the app, you can do things like HTTP2 push and send the right files at the right time and eliminate extra round trips for users. And lastly, and I think really kind of in line with the spirit of the Framework Summit, we definitely want more partnerships. We definitely care about the health of the web, and we're really glad to be a part of this great event that they put together. So if you think about the future of Angular, there's going to be smaller, faster, easier to use apps. But we really want to maintain this balance between stability and innovation, where you keep writing the same Angular apps you write today, tomorrow, but we're going to bring the best of the web and the best of the web ecosystem to you, making it really easy to take advantage of it, and then taking your apps further. And before I forget, if you want stickers, I have a bunch. Come ask. But thank you so much for having me.